A lot of the populations that are thought to be Proto-Bantu are actually originally Proto-Sudanic. These people were brought in as enslaved people bound to the Zanji in the capacity of soldiers for plundering expeditions, that's the men, or for the women as concubines and laborers. This applied to both men and women during the Zanji first invasion of the East African coast, which was Proto-Bantu territory in approximately 900 CE. These were the first soldiers, and we see them being used by the Moroccan sultans to fight the wars prior to 900 CE. The Zanji were seafaring people who sailed as far as China and used islands as their bases, so it would be interesting to understand where they stationed and who they abducted, because these islands had people there, and the Zanji used to abduct people from everywhere that they harbored. And also, there were black people or people with dark-colored skin living outside Africa on these islands. The Zanji were also extremely organized and extremely brutal, which is how they kept order. This organization is reflected in their split columns in populations such as the Gala or Muzimba's Jaga, who were highly organized and brutal. Muzimba was a Gala general. They were this way because it helped them maintain and manage a very large population of enslaved people. It didn't help their victims that they ate people too. The Zanji were nomadic plunderers, unlike the Proto-Bantu, who were settled agrarian cattle herders, hunter-gatherer. Both were spiritual populations. So, in order to understand how organized they were, let's look at Muzimba's Jaga, who were divided into 7 distinct quarters or districts, which were under the administrative control of a commander. The Galambo was the general of the army, who occupied the second level after the Jaga, who was Muzimba at the time. He ordered and directed all military expeditions. The third district was commanded by an officer called Wutendela, who was the commander of the rear guard. The fourth district was commanded by the Mani Lumbo, the chief engineer who ensured the camp was well fortified with hedges and fences. They did not use stone to build because all their structures were temporal structures, because they were nomadic and they moved according to wherever the plunder was available. The fifth district was the private commissions. It said he had the toughest job because he was immediately put to death in case of failure. The sixth district was commanded by the Ilunda, who was the quartermaster, responsible for managing military supplies, equipment, and logistics. The second Ilunda oversaw the leader's needs such as clothes, weapons, baths, etc. He was trusted and always the leader's relation, who had distinguished himself for his courage, loyalty, and service. The seventh was the Mani Kuryo, who was the chief plunderer. He moved with a great number of soldiers and enslaved people. This was the purpose of enslaving people and having such a large population. He and his soldiers would do the job of plundering, and the enslaved people would carry back the plunder to their camps. So he needed a lot of people, and this is where the term Zanji likely came from. The plunder had to be carried back somehow, so they were abducting a lot of people along their sailing routes. The Proto-Bantu were also tall people and not short and stout. On average, they were about 5'7" to 7 feet tall. These were the lengths of the bodies that were found at Great Zimbabwe, and also just generally when you look at the eastern seaboard, that was the general height of the people there. They also owed this to their diet as cattle herders who drank a lot of milk from a young age. And yes, milk does make you grow taller, in addition to genetics. And they were not lactose intolerant. The populations in Africa who are lactose intolerant usually come from the West because there's not enough cattle or milk drinking culture over there. Most people over there would not know what mavisi is or fermented sow milk. They don't eat it as a staple food, but this is a historical staple food along all the Proto-Bantu territories, or what was Proto-Bantu territory. Most people eat fermented milk or sour milk. The Proto-Bantu were cattle herders and had horned cattle, which were especially very important to the culture. They even have a cowhorn dance, and the military tactics were built around the cowhorn formation. This cowhorn formation was made especially famous by Ushaga, who was credited with having invented it, but it had existed long before him, and Ushaga was actually from the Gala column, or the Jaga column rather, that had invented Sofala in the 1600s. The High Lords were and are still called Mwami, but it is important to acknowledge that this title seems to have been hijacked and appropriated in Central and East Africa. Titles are very important in identifying cultures because they rarely change. People hold on to their titles quite a lot, so they're very easy markers to use when identifying different cultures, and they usually work. But you also need other factors like linguistics, culture, and so on. Mwami is a term used amongst the Proto-Bantu men towards one another. It was the title for the High Lords. Mwami is an expression that no man without a tall forefather from the Malengelo or the beginning can use because it doesn't apply to him. The forefathers were tall men, not short and stout. Women generally don't use this term to address any man because it's considered improper for a woman to address a man as Mwami, not out of subjugation or anything, but women have their own equivalent titles. But because she isn't a man, and this is a title that is used amongst men, women have their own titles and terms of endearment that they used amongst each other that men cannot use. Mwami is a synonym for alike and only used amongst men to acknowledge the men who are the best amongst them. Because the Proto-Bantu men, like the old people, were disproportionately targeted while their children were abducted and bred out by their invaders, this title almost died with them. Women were also spared, especially if they were attractive or of aristocratic birth, which allowed invaders legitimacy, although they made terrible wives. But sometimes their fate could be worse than being sacrificed. If they were lucky, they were married off to a formerly abducted vassal from their ethnic group who had since gained trust within this one. This happened to my grandmother's grandmother, but if not, they were kept for labor and as a concubine for as long as the man saw fit. Once he gave up on her or got fed up, he could give her away or unalive her. African history is also embedded within our languages, which is why fluency is very important. For example, the term Masai or Masai most likely comes from the Proto-Bantu language. Sai or Musai, as in Wai or Banyai, which are applied to what has been lost. Loosely translated means, where are you? But the accurate translation speaks to our missing or lost familiars. Sa is the same Sa in Musa, Sawona, Msanza, or Asanza. A is used to signify belonging to, and E, which is the double I, denotes unexpected absence. This may mean that many of the Proto-Bantu in East Africa were likely abducted into the Proto-Masai populations, and Sa'i was the cry for their loss. Ma means plenty, so plenty of them were likely abducted by the Proto-Masai populations who were Zanji or Gala columns. But there were also many Proto-Bantu survivors who survived because they were hidden by the priests. in the Malende or mountains. Some never came back, but others did. It's details like this that show why linguistic fluency of African or Proto-African languages is very important in contextualizing African history. African history is in our languages. It was written in the fabric of the spoken languages because all expressions have meaning and tell a history. The goal is to piece together all these stories as accurately as possible, no matter how ugly they are. Thank you for watching, and if you like this video, please like and subscribe. If you would like to show your support for this channel, please share this video. And if you can show your support by giving to our coffee, the link is in the description box below. We'll really appreciate it. Until the next time, Atutante Julu.